Emma had always dreamed of being a nurse since she was a little girl. She would play with her dolls, pretending to take care of them when they were sick. Her mother would smile and say, "Emma, you have such a caring heart." When Emma grew up, she made her dream come true. For 5 long years, she worked at St. Mary's Hospital in Manchester. Every morning, she would wake up excited to go to work. She loved putting on her white uniform and walking through the hospital halls. The smell of clean sheets and medicine didn't bother her like it did other people. To Emma, it smelled like hope. Emma was known by everyone at the hospital as the nurse who always had time to listen. When Mrs. Brown was scared before her surgery, Emma would sit by her bed and hold her hand. When little Tommy was crying because he missed his mommy, Emma would tell him funny stories until he smiled. She believed that healing wasn't just about giving medicine. It was about making people feel safe and loved. Her patients loved her. They would ask for Emma by name when they came to the hospital. The doctors respected her because she was careful and smart. Her fellow nurses looked up to her because she never complained. Even during the hardest shifts, Emma felt like she had found her place in the world. But one cold winter night, everything changed. It was a busy evening at the hospital. Emma was taking care of Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who had just had surgery on his hip. He was 78 years old and usually very polite and kind. His wife had died 2 years ago, and he lived alone, in a small flat. The surgery had gone well, but Mr. Thompson was having a bad reaction to his pain medication. The medicine was making him confused and angry. He didn't know where he was or who Emma was, in his confused state. He thought Emma was someone trying to hurt him. Emma came into his room to check his bandages and give him his evening pills. She spoke to him gently, the way she always did with her patients. But Mr. Thompson was frightened and didn't understand what was happening. His eyes looked wild and scared. "Get away from me," he shouted. Even though Emma was being very gentle, Emma tried to calm him down. She spoke in a soft, caring voice. "Mr. Thompson, it's okay. I'm Emma. You're a nurse. I'm here to help you feel better." But the medication had made him too confused to understand. In his fear, he reached out and grabbed Emma inappropriately, touching her in a way that made her feel scared and uncomfortable. Emma knew he wasn't thinking clearly, but she had to protect herself. She tried to gently move his hand away from her body. "Mr. Thompson, please let go," she said, trying to stay calm. But he held on tighter, and his grip was surprisingly strong for an elderly man. In the struggle that followed, Emma tried to step back while carefully removing his hand. But Mr. Thompson was pulling on her, and in his confusion, he tried to get out of bed quickly. His legs got tangled in the bed sheets, and he fell awkwardly to the floor. Emma heard a terrible crack. Mr. Thompson cried out in pain. His arm was bent in a strange way. Emma immediately knew what had happened. His arm was broken. She quickly called for help. Other nurses and doctors came running. They carefully lifted Mr. Thompson back into bed and took x-rays. The pictures showed that his arm was fractured into places. It wasn't a life-threatening injury, but it would take months to heal properly. Emma felt sick to her stomach. She had been trying to protect herself, but now her patient was hurt. Even though everyone who saw what happened agreed that Emma had done nothing wrong, she couldn't stop feeling guilty. The next morning, Emma was called into the office of Mrs. Wilson, her supervisor. Mrs. Wilson was a kind woman who had always supported Emma, but today her face looked sad and worried. "Emma, please sit down," Mrs. Wilson said quietly. "We need to talk about what happened last night." Emma's heart began to beat very fast. She knew this conversation would change her life. "I know you were protecting yourself," Mrs. Wilson continued. Everyone who saw what happened knows you did nothing wrong. But the hospital is worried about legal problems. Mr. Thompson's family might sue us. The hospital board has decided that we have to let you go. Emma felt like the world was spinning around her, but it wasn't my fault. She whispered, I know, Emma, I know, but the hospital can take any risks. I'm so sorry. You're a wonderful nurse, and this breaks my heart. Emma packed her things with shaking hands, her favorite coffee mug, the thank you cards from patients, her extra stethoscope. Each item felt heavy in her hands. She wondered how one terrible moment could destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. As she walked out of the hospital doors for the last time, Emma felt like her life was over. She didn't know that sometimes endings are really new beginnings in disguise. She didn't know that losing everything would help her find something even more beautiful. All she knew was that the dream she had carried since childhood was now broken, just like Mr. Thompson's arm. But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. 24 hours after losing her job, Emma sat in her small flat staring at the wall. She felt numb, like she was watching someone else's life fall apart. The phone rang, and she saw James's name on the screen. James was her boyfriend of 2 years. They had talked about getting married someday and buying a little house together. Hello, James, Emma said, hoping to hear his warm voice tell her everything would be okay. But James's voice sounded different, cold and distant. Emma, I've been thinking about what happened at the hospital. Emma felt her heart sink. James, you know it wasn't my fault. The patient was confused from his medication. I know, James said quickly. But people are talking, Emma. My friends at work are asking me questions. My mother heard about it from her neighbor. This whole thing is just too much drama. For me, Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. Drama. James, I lost my job. I thought you would support me. I can't handle this kind of stress. Emma, people are saying you hurt a patient. What if this affects my job at the bank? I think we should take a break. A break. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Actually, I think we should break up. I'm sorry, Emma, but I need to think about my future. The phone went out. Emma stared at it for a long time, wondering if James would call back and say he made a mistake. But the phone stayed quiet. The man she thought loved her had abandoned her when she needed him most. Emma cried until she had no tears left. She had lost her job and her boyfriend in less than 2 days. But the worst was yet to come. The next morning, Emma heard a loud knock on her door. She opened it to find Mr. Davis, her landlord. He was a thin man with grey hair who usually smiled. When he saw her today, he looked serious and uncomfortable. Good morning, Emma, he said, not meeting her eyes. I'm sorry to bother you, but I have some papers for you. Emma took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an eviction notice. She had 30 days to pay her rent or move out. Mr. Davis, I know I'm a few days late with the rent, but I just lost my job. Can you give me more time? Mr. Davis shook his head sadly. Emma, you're a good tenant, but I have bills to pay too. Without a job, how will you pay next month's rent? It's better if you find somewhere cheaper to live. After he left, Emma sat on her sofa and looked round her tiny flat. It wasn't much, but it was home. The yellow curtains her mother had made for her, the small bookshelf filled with nursing textbooks. The photo of her and James at the beach last summer, both of them smiling and happy. Emma picked up the photo and threw it in the trash can. She opened her laptop and checked her bank account. £50.37. That was all she had left in the world. Her nursing salary had never been huge, but it was enough to pay her bills and save a little each month. Now that safety net was gone, Emma tried calling her friend Lucy, who worked at the hospital with her. Lucy had always been kind and funny. They used to eat lunch together every day, but when Lucy saw Emma's name on her phone, she didn't answer. Emma tried again later. Still no answer. She called her friend Sarah from nursing school. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. Emma left a message, but Sarah never called back. Word traveled fast in their small town. Everyone knew about what happened at the hospital. Some people believed Emma's side of the story, but others whispered that maybe she had anger problems. Maybe she wasn't as nice as she seemed. Maybe there was more to the story. Emma felt like she was wearing a sign that said "Dangerous Nurse" everywhere she went. At the grocery store, she saw Mrs. Peterson from the church choir. When Mrs. Peterson saw Emma, she quickly looked away and walked down another aisle. Emma bought the cheapest food she could find: instant noodles, white bread, and peanut butter. She had eaten the same meal for 3 days in a row. The woman who used to eat healthy meals and take vitamins now couldn't afford fresh vegetables. She sat in her flat surrounded by cardboard boxes, preparing to move out. She had nowhere to go and no money to rent another place. Her parents lived far away in Scotland, and she was too proud to ask them for help. They had worked so hard to send her to nursing school. How could she tell them that her career was over? Emma looked at her nursing diploma hanging on the wall. 5 years of hard work and dreams, now just a piece of paper in a cheap frame. She took it down and put it in a box, wondering if she would ever hang it up again. "What's the point of anything?" she whispered to her empty room. The silence seemed to answer back with more silence. Emma felt like she was at the bottom of a deep, dark hole with no way to climb out. She didn't know that sometimes hitting rock bottom is the solid foundation we need to build something better. She didn't know that her story was just beginning, not ending. With nowhere else to go and her savings completely gone, Emma felt completely lost. She was sitting on a bench outside her old flat, surrounded by her few belongings in cardboard boxes, when she heard a gentle voice behind her. "Emma, dear, what are you doing out here?" Emma turned round to see Mrs. Patterson, her elderly neighbor from the flat next door. Mrs. Patterson was 72 years old with kind blue eyes and silver hair that she always kept neat and tidy. She had lived in the same flat for 30 years and knew everyone in the building. "I have to move out, Mrs. Patterson," Emma said, trying not to cry. "I can't afford the rent anymore." Mrs. Patterson looked at Emma's boxes and then at Emma's sad face. "Nonsense, child. You can't live on the street. I have a small spare room in my flat. You can stay there and help me with some things round the house. I'm getting too old to reach the high shelves and carry heavy shopping bags." Emma couldn't believe the kindness of this woman. "Mrs. Patterson, I don't have any money to pay you. Rent." Who said anything about money? Mrs. Patterson smiled. "I get lonely living by myself. It would be nice to have some company, and you can help me with things I can't do anymore." So Emma moved into Mrs. Patterson's tiny spare room. It was small, with just a single bed and a small window, but it felt like a palace compared to sleeping on the street. Mrs. Patterson made her tea and toast every morning and never made Emma feel like a burden. But Emma still felt empty inside. She had too much time to think about everything she had lost: her job, her boyfriend, her friends, her future. She needed something to fill her days. Mrs. Patterson noticed that Emma was sad and restless. "Emma, dear, there's a community center down the road where they serve meals to people who don't have homes. They always need volunteers. Maybe you could help there. Emma wasn't sure she wanted to be around people, but she needed something to do, so she walked to the community center on Oak Street. It was an old building with peeling paint, but inside it was warm and welcoming. Father Michael ran the center. He was a tall man with a grey beard who always wore a kind smile. When Emma introduced herself and asked about volunteering, his face lit up. "We always need help serving meals and cleaning up," he said. "Can you start today?" Emma began working at the center every day. She served soup and sandwiches to people who had nowhere else to go. At first, she just did her job quietly, but slowly she began to notice the people she was helping. That's where she met Grace. Grace was a woman in her 60s with short grey hair and tired eyes. She came to the center every day for lunch, but Emma noticed that Grace walked very slowly and seemed to be in pain. One day, Emma sat down next to Grace while she was eating. "Are you feeling all right?" Emma asked gently. Grace looked up with surprise. Most people didn't bother to really talk to the homeless people. They just served the food and looked away. "My feet hurt all the time," Grace said quietly. "I have diabetes, but I can't afford my medicine anymore. I lost my job 2 years ago, and then I lost my flat." Emma's heart filled with compassion. She understood what it felt like to lose everything. "Can I look at your feet?" Emma asked. "I used to be a nurse." Grace nodded and carefully took off her old, worn shoes. Emma could see that Grace's feet were very swollen and had several infected cuts. This was dangerous for someone with diabetes, Grace. "These cuts could become very serious if we don't take care of them," Emma said. "Let me help you." Even though Emma was no longer officially a nurse, she still remembered everything she had learned. She went to the pharmacy and bought antiseptic and bandages with her own money. She cleaned Grace's wounds very carefully and taught her how to check her feet every day. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Grace asked with tears in her eyes. "Most people act like I'm invisible, because I know what it's like to feel like the world has given up on you," Emma replied. Word spread quickly among the people who came to the community center. They learned that there was a woman named Emma who had medical knowledge and truly cared about helping them. Soon, more people were coming to Emma with their health problems. She helped Tom, a young man who had a bad cough, and taught him about keeping warm in cold weather. She showed Mary, a mother with 2 small children, how to treat her baby's diaper rash when she couldn't afford to see a doctor. She listened to Robert's story about losing his job and his home, and helped him clean an infected cut on his hand. Emma didn't have fancy medical equipment or expensive medicines. She just had her knowledge, her gentle hands, and her caring heart. But for these people who had been forgotten by everyone else, that was everything. Father Michael watched Emma work with the people at the center. One evening, as they were cleaning up after dinner, he said to her, "Emma, you have a special gift. These people trust you because you understand what it's like to lose everything." For the first time in months, Emma felt useful again. She realized that healing wasn't just about working in a hospital with clean white sheets and expensive machines. It was about bringing hope to people who had given up on themselves. Emma had found her light in the darkness. Emma had been working at the community center for 3 months when something wonderful happened. She was cleaning Grace's feet wounds one afternoon when a man in a white coat walked into the center. He was watching Emma work with great interest. Father Michael walked over to the man and shook his hand. "Dr. Roberts, thank you for coming. I wanted you to meet Emma, the volunteer I told you about." Dr. Roberts was a kind-looking man in his 50s with gentle brown eyes behind wire glasses. He ran a small clinic on the other side of town that helped people who couldn't afford to pay for medical care. He had heard about Emma from Father Michael and wanted to see her work for himself. Emma looked up from bandaging Grace's foot. "Hello, Dr. Roberts. Father Michael told me about your clinic. The work you do sounds amazing." Dr. Roberts smiled. "Actually, Emma, I came here to talk to you. Father Michael tells me you have medical training and that you've been helping people here with health problems." Emma nodded but looked worried. "I hope I'm not doing anything wrong. I know I'm not officially a nurse anymore, but these people need help." "You're not doing anything wrong," Dr. Roberts said gently. "In fact, you're doing something very right. I've been watching you work, and I can see that these people trust you completely. That's the most important thing in medicine." Grace looked up at Dr. Roberts. "Emma saved my feet," she said proudly. "The infection was getting really bad, but she took care of me every day. No doctor ever spent that much time with me." Dr. Roberts nodded thoughtfully. "Emma, I have a proposal for you. My clinic needs a community health worker. Someone who can go out into the community and help people who won't come to a doctor's office. Would you be interested?" Emma's heart began to beat faster. "But Dr. Roberts, I lost my nursing license. The hospital let me go." "You may not have a hospital position," Dr. Roberts said, "but you have something more valuable than any license. You have the trust of people who need help most, and that's something you can't learn in school." Emma couldn't believe it, after months of feeling worthless. Someone was offering her a real job helping people again. She started working at Dr. Roberts' clinic the next week. Her job was different from hospital nursing, but Emma loved it even more. Instead of working with patients who came to the hospital, Emma went out into the community to find people who needed help. She visited elderly people in their homes, checked on families in poor neighborhoods, and continued her work at the community center. Emma started teaching health classes in the evenings at the community center. She showed single mothers like Mary how to treat their children's fevers and when to know if they needed to see a doctor. She taught elderly people like Mr. Johnson how to remember to take their medications and how to check their blood pressure. She helped teenagers understand basic hygiene and taught them about staying healthy. Many of these young people had never learned these things because their families were too busy working or didn't have education themselves. Emma's classes became very popular. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, the community center was full of people wanting to learn. Emma used simple words and showed them everything step by step. She made everyone feel comfortable asking questions, even if they thought their questions were silly. One evening, a young woman named Jessica approached Emma after class. Jessica worked for the Manchester Evening News, the local newspaper. "Emma, I've been hearing amazing things about the work you're doing," Jessica said. "Would you be willing to let me write an article about you?" Emma was nervous about being in the newspaper. She was still worried that people would remember the bad things that happened at the hospital. But Dr. Roberts encouraged her to share her story. "People need to know that good things can come from difficult situations," he told her. "Your story might help other people who are going through hard times." So Emma agreed to the interview. She told Jessica about losing her job at the hospital, about James leaving her, about living with Mrs. Patterson, and about finding her purpose at the community center. The article was published the following week with the title "From Hospital to Hope: One Nurse's Journey to Heal a Community." Emma was nervous to read it, but when she did, she cried happy tears. Jessica had written about Emma's work with such kindness and respect. The article spread quickly. People shared it on social media, and soon thousands of people had read Emma's story. But the most amazing thing was what happened next. Donations started arriving at Dr. Roberts' clinic addressed to Emma's programs. People sent boxes of medical supplies. warm clothes for the homeless people, and money to help buy medicine for people who couldn't afford it. A retired nurse from London sent a box of blood pressure machines. A pharmacy in Birmingham donated hundreds of bandages and antiseptic creams. A group of medical students raised money to buy thermometers and first aid supplies. Emma couldn't believe that so many strangers cared about her work. She used every donation carefully to help more people in the community. Other healthcare workers who had faced similar problems wrote letters to Emma. They told her that her story gave them hope and inspired them to keep helping people even when things were difficult. Emma realized that losing her hospital job had led her to something much bigger and more meaningful. She wasn't just treating individual patients anymore. She was healing an entire community and inspiring others to do the same. One evening, as Emma was cleaning up after her health class, Grace came up to her with tears in her eyes. "Emma, I want to thank you," Grace said. "Not just for helping my feet, but for showing me that people still care about each other." Emma hugged Grace tightly. "I used to think my career was over," Emma said. "Now I know it was just beginning." 2 years had passed since the terrible night at St. Mary's Hospital. Emma's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. She now worked full-time at Dr. Roberts' clinic. And her community health programs had grown bigger than anyone expected. Emma had become well known throughout Manchester for her work with people who couldn't afford healthcare. She spoke at conferences and helped train other healthcare workers about how to handle difficult situations with patients. Her story had even helped hospitals change their policies to better protect both patients and staff when emergencies happen. Emma had written a simple guide called Caring for Everyone that taught healthcare workers how to stay calm during difficult situations and how to help patients who were confused or scared. Hospitals across England were using her guide to train their nurses and doctors. One Tuesday morning, Emma was preparing for her daily health class when she looked up and saw a familiar face in the wait room. Her heart stopped for a moment. It was Mr. Thompson, the elderly patient from that night 2 years ago that had changed everything. Thompson looked older now, and he was using a walking stick to help him move around. When he saw Emma, his face showed worry and shame. He walked slowly toward her, and Emma could see that he was nervous. "Miss Emma," he said quietly, his voice shaking a little. "I don't know if you remember me, but I'm George Thompson. I was your patient at St. Mary's Hospital 2 years ago." Emma felt her heart fill with different emotions all at once. She remembered that night so clearly, but looking at Mr. Thompson now, she didn't feel angry or sad. She felt something she didn't expect to feel. She felt grateful. "Of course I remember you, Mr. Thompson," Emma said with a gentle smile. "Please sit down." "How are you feeling?" Mr. Thompson sat down carefully in the chair next to Emma's desk. He looked down at his hands and took a deep breath before speaking. "Miss Emma, I came here to apologize to you," he said, his eyes filling with tears. "I heard about what happened to you after that night. I heard that you lost your job at the hospital because of me. I was confused from my medication. But that's no excuse for what I did to you." Emma leaned forward and spoke in the same caring voice she had always used with her patients. "Mr. Thompson, you don't need to apologize. You were sick and scared. The medication made you confused. None of that was your fault. But you lost your job because of me," Mr. Thompson said, wiping his eyes with a tissue. "I heard that your whole life fell apart. I've been feeling guilty about this for 2 years. I finally found the courage to come and say I'm sorry." Emma smiled warmly at the old man. "Mr. Thompson, that night did change my life completely. But you know what? It led me exactly where I needed to be. If that night hadn't happened, I would never have found this work. I would never have learned that I could help people in a different way. Mr. Thompson looked up at Emma with surprise. You mean you're not angry with me? Not at all, Emma said. How are you feeling now? How is your arm? Much better, thanks. To good doctors like you, Mr. Thompson replied. My arm healed perfectly, but I've been struggling with other things. Emma and Mr. Thompson talked for over an hour. Emma learned that Mr. Thompson had been very lonely since his wife Margaret died 3 years ago. He had no children and very few friends left. The loneliness had made his recovery from surgery much harder. And that's why the medication had affected him so badly. I spend most days alone in my flat, Mr. Thompson admitted. Sometimes I don't talk to another person for days. I think that's why I was so confused and frightened that night. I felt so alone and scared. Emma's heart filled with compassion. She knew exactly what loneliness felt like. Mr. Thompson, I have an idea. We have a program here for elderly people who live alone. Every Wednesday afternoon, we have a group that meets for tea and conversation, and on Fridays, we have people who can visit you at home just to chat. Would you like to join us? Mr. Thompson's face lit up with the first real smile Emma had seen from him. That sounds wonderful. I would love to have people to talk to. Emma introduced Mr. Thompson to Grace, who was now one of Emma's volunteer helpers. Grace had learned so much about managing her diabetes that she was teaching other diabetic patients how to take care of themselves. Grace and Mr. Thompson became fast friends, and she promised to make sure he felt welcome in their programs that evening, as Emma was locking up the clinic. She thought about how strange life could be. The man who had accidentally caused her to lose everything had just become part of the community she was now helping to heal. Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She looked at it and was surprised to see it was from James, her ex-boyfriend who had left her when she needed him most. The message said, Emma, I saw the article about your work in the newspaper. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. I was wrong to leave you when things got difficult. Would you like to meet for a coffee sometime? I'd love a second chance. Emma read the message twice and then deleted it without responding. She had grown beyond needing James's approval or love. She had found something much more valuable than a boyfriend who would leave when times got hard. She had found her true purpose in life. Emma looked round her busy clinic. The walls were covered with thank you cards from people she had helped. Grace was teaching a new diabetic patient how to check his blood sugar. Mr. Thompson was chatting happily with other elderly people in the waiting room. Dr. Roberts was examining a homeless man who had finally found the courage to see a doctor. Emma realized that she had found her true purpose. It wasn't in the clean, sterile halls of a hospital. It was in this messy, beautiful work of healing hearts and communities. She was exactly where she belonged.